Every moment, every heartbeat feels like the world stops when you're near. In your eyes, I find forever, a place where love is crystal clear. Through the storms and through the night, your hand in mine, we find the light. Every shadow fades away. When you're with me, I want to stay.
Cinderella hummed a jaunty tune as she swept the kitchen floor, her mop squeaking in rhythm with her footsteps. If this floor gets any cleaner, it might just start shining in a mirror contest, she muttered to the scrubbing brush, which she held like a microphone. The mouse on the counter gave an approving squeak, as if cheering her on. Her stepmother, Lady Tremaine, appeared at the doorway, her silk dress swishing ominously. "Cinderella, don't dawdle. The silver polish isn't going to polish itself. And your stepsisters expect breakfast that's hotter than the sun." "Yes, stepmother," Cinderella replied cheerfully, her grin hiding her weariness. "Though I must admit, I'm still working on that self-cleaning floor spell." "It's tricky," she winked at the mop. Her stepsisters, Anastasia and Drizella, barged in, their curls bouncing and their gowns in perfect disorder. Anastasia frowned at Cinderella. "Why are you always so chipper when we're suffering? Some of us might enjoy a little chaos with our chores." "Chaos is my middle name," Cinderella said with a sly smile. "Actually, it's Euphemia, but that doesn't rhyme with much." She twirled, almost losing her balance, and caught herself with the broom like a seasoned acrobat. The house, old and creaky, seemed to respond to her mood. The chandelier swayed dramatically, the wind whistled through the broken attic window, and the fireplace crackled like it was laughing along with her antics. Even the cats, usually aloof, seemed entertained as they batted at falling dust motes, treating them like glittering confetti. Then a commotion outside interrupted her little morning comedy. The royal herald clattered into the courtyard, trumpet in hand, drawing the attention of the entire household. Lady Tremaine clutched her pearls. "What is it now?" she demanded. "By order of His Royal Highness, the Prince of the Kingdom," the herald announced, puffing from the effort of climbing the front steps. "A grand ball will be held at the palace. Every eligible maiden is invited, that the prince may choose a bride." The stepsisters gasped, fainted slightly, dramatically, of course, and immediately began discussing dresses, jewelry, and which hairpins matched their eyes. Lady Tremaine's eyes gleamed with ambition. "Cinderella, you will stay behind and finish your chores," she commanded, flicking her fan. "We wouldn't want you embarrassing the family in your—" She paused, searching for the word, "rags." Cinderella bowed politely, hiding a smile behind her hand. "Of course, stepmother. Someone has to keep the house from completely imploding while you all practice curtsies." Once they were gone, she leaned against the doorframe. Cinderella sat on the edge of the attic stairs, staring at the single candle flickering beside her. The moonlight streamed through the dusty window, illuminating a small, forgotten trunk tucked in the corner. Her heart skipped a beat when she opened it. Inside lay a gown, faded and slightly torn, but unmistakably her mother's. "Oh, mother," she whispered, tracing the delicate embroidery with her fingers. "If only this dress could talk. it would probably sigh at my sewing skills. She dragged the gown to the rickety old sewing table, surrounded by scattered spools of thread, mismatched buttons, and a pin cushion that seemed to grow pins overnight. With determination, she began mending the gown, but her skills were, let's say, enthusiastic. The first attempt at stitching sent the hem twisting into a hilarious zigzag. "Well," Cinderella said to the gown, "we're going for avant-garde elegance. Very in right now." She tied a loose bow, only for it to unravel and fling a needle across the room, which narrowly missed the family cat. The cat hissed indignantly, jumping into a box of old hats, causing a miniature avalanche of feathers. "Pip," Cinderella called to the mouse perched on her shoulder. "A little help here? Perhaps a magic spell?" Pip twitched his whiskers as if to say, "Not my department, lady." Undeterred, Cinderella tugged at the gown, accidentally snapping a button, which ricocheted into the attic mirror and landed squarely in her lap. She stared at it, sighed, then burst into laughter. "Well, at least I'm accessorized." She moved on to her hair, hoping to tame the wild curls that refused to behave. A curl here, a pin there, only to emerge with a hairstyle that looked like it had been designed by a tornado with a fondness for chaos. Cinderella examined herself in the cracked mirror. "Charming, in a post-storm sort of way," she muttered, smiling at her reflection. All the while, her mind wandered to the ball. She imagined herself twirling through the palace halls, laughter spilling from her lips, the prince's eyes twinkling as he stumbled over his own formalities just to keep up with her. She envisioned slipping on a dance, laughing so hard she nearly stepped on the toes of a very dignified duke. Her stepmother's voice thundered from below. "Cinderella, are you still up there daydreaming? Floors won't scrub themselves." "Yes, stepmother," she called down, holding the half-stitched gown like a flag of defiance. "I'm fashionably late on the chores." Priorities. The gown, in its current state, looked like something a patchwork fairy would laugh at. But Cinderella didn't mind. She twirled, caught in the swirl of imagination, and for a moment she felt lighter than she had in years. Even in the attic, surrounded by dust, cats, and crooked stitches, Cinderella's heart danced. She sighed, a secret smile tugging at her lips. "If only I could attend. If only the world could see me for me, not a servant." But dreams, she whispered to herself, sometimes have a way of sneaking into reality when you least expect them. And with that, she gathered her scattered threads, crooked pins, and tattered gown, determined to make something magical from her dreams, one hilarious stitch at a time. Cinderella sat in the attic, surrounded by pins, broken buttons, and the half-stitched gown, letting out a long, frustrated sigh. "Why is everything impossible today?" she muttered to herself. "Even the cat is giving me judgmental looks." Suddenly, a spark of light danced across the room. Cinderella blinked. Another spark, then a twinkle, then a full-blown glow that made the shadows leap across the walls. "Oh," she gasped, clutching the tattered gown. "Is that ghost?" The figure shimmered and took shape, a fairy with a twinkle in her eye and a wand that sparkled like a disco ball. She floated down gracefully, though her descent involved a small pirouette and a dramatic swoosh of glitter. "Not a ghost, dearie," the fairy said in a sing-song voice. "I'm your fairy godmother, and I must say..." She gestured at the gown with a theatrical flourish. "This is quite the DIY fashion disaster." Cinderella blinked. I was trying." The fairy tutted, tapping her wand on the floor, which made a tiny puff of smoke. Trying isn't enough, darling. You need magic and a little flair. She snapped her fingers, and a swirl of sparkling dust surrounded the gown. Cinderella clutched the dress, eyes wide as threads untangled themselves. Rips healed, and the fabric shimmered. The color deepened into a dazzling midnight blue, studded with glittering stars that seemed to move as she twirled. And the shoes, the fairy godmother announced, pointing her wand at Cinderella's feet. Glass slippers materialized, sparkling like the night sky. Cinderella hopped in surprise, nearly tipping over. I can walk in these, she asked. Only until midnight, dear. Then, poof, back to slippers you can scrub floors in, the fairy said with a wink. The attic door creaked, and Cinderella's jaw dropped as the fairy clapped her hands. A pumpkin at the corner rolled forward and puffed into a golden carriage. The mice, previously scurrying about in panic, now stood tall, dressed in tiny coachman outfits, snickering. "We're ready, Miss C," squeaked one. Cinderella laughed so hard she nearly tripped over a flying feather. The fairy godmother twirled around Cinderella. "Now remember, be charming, be witty, and try not to set anything on fire. Oh, and return by midnight." Cinderella saluted dramatically. "Yes, ma'am." "Got it. Charming, witty. Check." She paused, looking at the sparkling carriage and the gleaming gown. "This is incredible." "Of course it is," said the fairy godmother, snapping her fingers once more. "And remember, dear, the prince is nice and all, but don't let him steal your cleverness." Cinderella stepped into the carriage, laughing with nerves and excitement. The mice pulled the reins, the pumpkin's wheels sparkled, and a little bell jingled as they began their ride to the palace. As the moonlight bathed her in silver, Cinderella leaned back, laughing at the absurdity of it all. "Well," she said to herself, "if life is going to be magical, it might as well be funny too." And with that, the carriage whisked her toward the ball, Cinderella's heart racing with anticipation, ready for the adventure and the laughter that awaited. The grand doors of the palace swung open, and Cinderella stepped into a world of sparkling chandeliers, golden candelabras, and a sea of silk and satin. Music floated through the air, delicate yet commanding, setting the rhythm of the evening. Servants hurried about, balancing trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while noble guests whispered and fanned themselves in perfect unison. Heads turned, whispers rippled through the crowd. "Who is she? She doesn't look like anyone from the ton." But Cinderella barely noticed the murmurs. She walked with a playful grace, curtsying slightly to the left, twirling just enough to make the stars on her dress glitter with every step. She even gave a cheeky wink to a duke who was clearly overestimating his charm. Meanwhile, the prince, standing near the orchestra, noticed the swirl of blue and starlight cutting through the crowd. He blinked. He nudged his advisor. "Who is that?" She's not from any noble house we know of, Your Highness," the advisor said cautiously. The prince barely heard him. His gaze was fixed, his curiosity piqued. Gathering his courage, he strode toward her, only to get caught in a cluster of giggling debutantes. One elbowed him lightly. "Watch out, Your Highness. Eyes on the prize." Cinderella, meanwhile, was scanning the room, taking in the chaos with amusement. She ducked under a chandelier, almost tipping a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and offered the waiter a polite, apologetic smile. "Sorry, the stars in my dress are very distracting tonight." the prince finally reached her, bowing with a flourish that nearly sent him sprawling on the polished floor. "May I have this dance?" he asked, offering his hand with a grin that mirrored hers. Cinderella took his hand, raising an eyebrow. "You may, but I should warn you, I have 2 left feet and a tendency to improvise." Their first steps were, predictably, disastrous. The prince stepped on her toes. She nearly tripped over the hem of her gown, and a small chandelier above them jingled in apparent protest. Yet, instead of awkwardness turning to embarrassment, both burst into laughter, the sound ringing clear across the ballroom. The orchestra, uncertain, played on, but Cinderella seized the moment. "Follow my lead, or don't. Either way, we'll make it memorable." The prince grinned, laughing along. They stumbled, spun, and twirled, somehow managing to step in sync at the perfect moments. Courtiers whispered in astonishment. They're having fun in the middle of a royal ball. By the end of the dance, Cinderella's confidence and humor had won over more than just the prince. The entire court was enchanted, not merely by her beauty, but by the infectious joy she brought to the stiff formality of the palace. The prince, slightly out of breath but completely captivated, bowed low. "I must say," he said, trying to catch his composure, "that was the most exhilarating dance I've ever had." Cinderella grinned, brushing a stray curl from her face. "Most exhilarating? That's because you didn't even know you were dancing with the Queen of Chaos." He laughed, genuinely and warmly. "Then I am honored to be your subject, your Majesty of Chaos." As the orchestra struck a triumphant chord, Cinderella and the prince shared a lingering smile. Neither of them knew what the night would bring, but both felt a spark, a light-hearted, magnetic connection that promised adventure, laughter, and perhaps a touch of romance. The grand ballroom had become a whirl of formalities, polished etiquette, and stiff smiles. Cinderella, however, had no interest in being polished tonight. She tugged the prince gently by the hand. "Come on," she whispered, eyes sparkling. "There's more to a ball than standing still and nodding like furniture." The prince raised an eyebrow, amused. "Are you suggesting we make mischief?" "Absolutely," Cinderella grinned, leading him toward the palace gardens. The moonlight spilled across neatly trimmed hedges and winding paths, the fountains reflecting the stars above. The night air was cool and fragrant with roses. They strolled side by side, sharing stories that made the stiff formality of the ballroom feel like a distant memory. "So," Cinderella said, nudging a marble statue with her elbow, "what do you think of Mr. Marblehead here?" The prince chuckled. "He looks distinguished." "He's a bit of a gossip," Cinderella whispered conspiratorially, though he swears he saw the stepsisters attempting the cha-cha earlier. The prince laughed, nearly stumbling over a fountain's edge. "Terrible joke," he said with mock sternness, "but I like it." Cinderella clapped her hands. Finally, someone with a proper sense of humor. As they wandered, they discovered shared quirks. The prince confessed his love for bad puns. So bad, they were astonishingly funny. Cinderella admitted she often had full conversations with inanimate objects, especially furniture. "I swear, the candlestick whispered to me last week," she said earnestly. It said, "Cinderella, less dusting, more dancing." The prince laughed so hard he doubled over. "Then it's a good thing I've met you." I could use some advice from inanimate friends too. They teased each other mercilessly, laughter echoing through the moonlit garden. Cinderella leaned against a fountain, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "You know," she said softly, "I didn't think a prince could be this human." He smiled, gazing down at her. "And I didn't think a servant girl." He paused, realizing he didn't know her station, "could make me laugh like this." Their hands brushed as they leaned on the fountain together. The touch sent a gentle spark between them, a hint of romantic tension. Neither rushed it, letting the moment breathe with shared laughter and teasing glances. Meanwhile, back at the ballroom, the stepsisters had discovered their opportunity. Draped in silk and armed with desperate charm, they flitted around the prince. "Your Highness," one cooed, "do you enjoy, chess?" The other swooned, nearly toppling a tray of punch. The prince, distracted by memories of laughter in the garden, barely paid attention. The stepsisters exchanged confused glances, tried again, and ended up tangling themselves in a tapestry. Cinderella, watching secretly from the shadows as she returned briefly to check on them, stifled a laugh behind her hand. "Oh dear," she whispered to herself, "the entertainment writes itself." Returning to the garden, the prince offered his arm. "Shall we continue our garden adventures?" Cinderella accepted, looping her arm with his. "Lead the way, your Highness of awkwardly perfect jokes." Together, they wandered through moonlit paths, discovering not only the palace grounds, but also a connection that promised laughter, tenderness, and a growing spark neither could ignore. Cinderella glanced at the grand clock tower, its golden hands inching toward midnight. A small, panicked squeak escaped her lips. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," she whispered, juggling the layers of her sparkling gown as she tried to gracefully back away from the ballroom. The prince, oblivious to the impending magic deadline, was busy stealing another laugh from her. "So you actually argue with chairs?" he asked, clearly still entertained. "Yes," Cinderella said, hurrying backward. "And they have opinions, your Highness." "You wouldn't understand." She darted past a group of courtiers, narrowly avoiding a chandelier, then tripped over a loose carpet. Arms flailing, she landed straight into the fountain, sending a spray of water into the air. Glass slippers glinted under the moonlight as she sputtered and laughed simultaneously. "Oh, fantastic," she muttered, dripping wet but still smiling. "Now I'm Cinderella, the soaked edition." The prince, alarmed yet amused, leapt forward and caught her just as the first chime of midnight rang. "Cinderella," he called, laughing despite the urgency. "Are you trying to test the laws of physics?" "I may have slightly failed," she admitted, shaking water from her hair, sending droplets flying in all directions. Then came the next chime. "Uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh," she panicked, wriggling out of his arms to make a proper exit. In her haste, one of her glittering glass slippers slipped off her foot, landing with a delicate clink on the polished marble floor. The last chime echoed. A flash of magic shimmered and vanished. The gown returned to its tattered attic version. The carriage turned back into a pumpkin, and the mice froze in bewildered squeaks. Cinderella, now half soaked and giggling despite herself, bolted up the grand staircase and out the palace doors, disappearing into the night before the prince could even reach her. The prince knelt to pick up the single glass slipper left behind. He turned it over in his hand, eyes alight with determination. "She's clever, witty, and absolutely unforgettable," he murmured. "I will find her. I don't care if I have to search every house in the kingdom." Meanwhile, The stepsisters peeked from a nearby balcony, attempting to swoon dramatically. They didn't notice the soaked, tattered gown flapping in the wind like a flag of defeat. Cinderella, laughing to herself from a safe distance, whispered, "Well, at least they didn't see me make a complete splash of myself." She darted through the streets, heart racing with exhilaration, knowing that she had left a tiny piece of herself behind, but also a promise. This adventure was far from over, and so the prince, slipper in hand, set off on a quest that would test his patience, wit, and determination, while Cinderella remained blissfully unaware of just how determined he truly was. The sun rose over the kingdom, its golden rays illuminating cobblestone streets and thatched rooftops as the prince's grand procession made its way from village to village. His aides carried baskets of delicate glass slippers, while he clutched the lone slipper from the ball like a sacred treasure. Word of the prince's quest spread quickly, causing chaos and excitement in equal measure. Every household prepared for the possible visit. Young maidens dusted off their finest gowns, and gossip flowed like wine at a feast. At Cinderella's home, the stepmother clutched the curtains like a lifeline. "Quick, girls, hide your feet. This is our chance." The stepsisters, already decked in their most absurdly ostentatious dresses, strutted forward with exaggerated confidence, each determined to conquer the delicate glass slipper. The first sister jammed her foot in and yelped. It's stuck." She wiggled and twisted, squealing as the shoe refused to cooperate. The second sister followed, attempting to force her foot into the slipper. She nearly fell over, landing on the floor with a dramatic thud. Cinderella, perched on a windowsill, couldn't contain herself. She peeked through the curtain, stifling laughter behind a hand. Oh, the chaos. Comedy gold. The prince, trying to maintain his composure, raised an eyebrow. "Are you two attempting a new dance?" Or, finally, after several failed attempts, he sighed and motioned to his aides. "We must continue. Every maiden must try, or I will never find her." The entourage moved from house to house, leaving behind a trail of flustered families, embarrassed daughters, and whispered rumors. Cinderella trailed behind her stepmother and sisters, pretending to busy herself with sweeping the floors, all the while enjoying the spectacle. Hours passed, and frustration began to show on the prince's face. "I've searched every village, every street, yet still, the slipper remains unmatched. There must be something I'm missing." At last, they arrived at Cinderella's home. The stepmother, clutching her chest dramatically, attempted to block the doorway. "Your Highness, I'm afraid there's been a mistake. Surely there are other homes." The prince smiled politely but firmly. "I am determined to try every home. Please step aside," Cinderella, sensing the perfect moment, stepped forward. Her dress was simple, slightly worn, but she held her head high, her playful smile radiating confidence. "If it's all the same to you, Your Highness," she said lightly, "I'd like to see if the slipper fits." The stepmother gasped, flustered, while the stepsisters' mouths fell open. The prince's eyes widened, captivated not only by her poise, but by the unmistakable spark of humor and cleverness that had enchanted him at the ball. "Of course," he said, bowing slightly. "Please, show me." Cinderella knelt gracefully and slid her foot into the glass slipper. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. She stood, and the prince's face lit up with recognition and delight. "So," he said, still holding the slipper in his hand. "This is the girl who made me laugh, who danced through chaos, and, if I may say, who stole my heart." Cinderella tilted her head, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "I suppose it must be," she replied, her eyes twinkling. The stepmother sputtered, the stepsisters fumed, and Cinderella simply laughed, warm, light-hearted, and victorious. The prince extended his hand to her, and she took it without hesitation, the perfect match of wit, courage, and charm standing before him. Cinderella knelt gracefully, her fingers brushing the delicate glass slipper. She wiggled her toes, testing it, and, like a glove, it fit perfectly. She stood and turned to face the prince, who blinked in astonishment. "So it's you," he said, voice filled with wonder. "The girl from the ball. The one who," he hesitated, smiling, "made me laugh more than anyone else in the kingdom." Cinderella's lips curved into a playful grin. "Well, I do try. Some call it charm, others call it chaos management." From behind, the stepsisters attempted to recover their dignity, or at least pretend they hadn't just failed spectacularly. We were joking," one declared, waving her hands dramatically. "Yes, absolutely joking." The other nodded frantically. "Of course. Who would ever, think a slipper would fit?" Cinderella arched an eyebrow, stepping closer. "Really?" she said, her voice laced with playful sarcasm. "Because I could have sworn you tried to turn the royal slipper into a wrestling match." The prince chuckled, holding back laughter. "I must admit," he said, "I didn't think anyone could manage to be both entertaining and enchanting at the same time." Cinderella turned to the stepsisters, bowing slightly with mock elegance. "It's okay, dears. Not everyone can be brilliant, witty, and graceful all at once. Some of us have to settle for, well, comedic relief." The stepsisters sputtered, flustered, as if Cinderella's words had knocked all color from their faces. "And as for you, stepmother," Cinderella said, tilting her head with a mischievous sparkle in her eye, "I do hope you've learned that kindness, sometimes paired with a sense of humor, trumps scolding and scheming every time." The stepmother opened her mouth, then closed it again, speechless. The prince, thoroughly entertained, offered his hand to Cinderella. "Come with me," he said, "so we can make sure your brilliance isn't wasted on sweeping floors and talking to furniture." Cinderella took his hand, laughing softly. "Lead the way, your highness of terrible jokes and good taste." The court watched in awe, part admiration, part amusement, as the girl who had turned chaos into laughter and chores into charm now confidently stood beside the prince. The stepsisters glared, the stepmother fumed, but Cinderella simply twirled once, letting her laughter fill the courtyard. Her humor, warmth, and cleverness shone brighter than any gown, crown, or glass slipper ever could. The prince squeezed her hand gently. "You truly are extraordinary." "And you," Cinderella replied with a teasing smirk, "are hilariously lucky." Laughter mingled with astonishment, and the kingdom began to realize this Cinderella was no ordinary girl. She was a force of charm, wit, and love, a combination the prince would never forget. The palace buzzed with excitement and nervous whispers. Courtiers polished chandeliers, maids fluffed pillows, and chefs scrambled in the kitchens. Cinderella had officially arrived, and so had the chaos. Her first royal attempt, the tiara. She plopped it atop her head, only to have it slide down over one eye. "Well," she said, peeking from beneath the glittering crown, "at least now I can see where all the gossip is coming from." The prince laughed heartily. "It suits you. Perfectly imperfect." Next, Cinderella tried walking across the grand hall. Her gown was magnificent, but she hadn't quite mastered the art of graceful royal steps. She tripped over the velvet curtains, sending them swinging like sails in a storm. A startled page ducked under a candelabra, narrowly avoiding disaster. I'm fine," Cinderella said, rising with a bow that made the chandeliers sway slightly. "Just adding a little excitement to the palace decor." The culinary incident was equally spectacular. Tasked with ordering desserts for the evening, Cinderella misread the royal ledger. "I'll take 500 pies," she said confidently, thinking it was a joke. The kitchen erupted into chaos. Bakers scrambling, sugar flying, rolling pins clattering. The head chef fainted behind a mountain of pastry, while the sous chef muttered, "This is unprecedented." The prince, observing from the balcony, couldn't contain his laughter. "Only you," he said, shaking his head with delight, "could turn a palace into a circus and somehow make it charming." Cinderella, cheeks flushed but smiling, winked at him. "Well, I aim to please, and occasionally terrify." Despite the mishaps, her presence brought warmth to the palace. Courtiers and staff grew to love her humor, her kindness, and her surprising adaptability. She spoke to the royal hounds as if they were old friends, taught the royal cook a shortcut to pastry perfection, which mostly involved laughter, and even gave etiquette lessons to the stepsisters, who stumbled hilariously under her guidance. Through it all, the prince stayed close, teasing and supporting her at every turn. "You know," he said one evening as they practiced ballroom steps in the hall, "I was worried about marrying a princess. But now, I just want to marry you." Cinderella smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Well, lucky for you, Your Highness. I'm in a forgiving mood today." And so, amidst flying pies, tilted tiaras, and tumbling curtains, love blossomed. The prince adored her spontaneity, the kingdom grew fond of her humor, and Cinderella, still the clever, witty girl from the attic, found herself at home in the grand palace, one hilarious mishap at a time. The grand hall sparkled like a constellation, candles flickering and chandeliers glittering. Courtiers, nobles, and servants gathered, curious to witness the moment they had all anticipated, the prince's declaration of love. He stood at the center, a mixture of regal poise and unrestrained excitement. Cinderella, radiant yet relaxed, leaned slightly against a marble pillar, her playful grin keeping the tension at bay. "My friends, my kingdom," the prince began, his voice echoing warmly. "I have spent my life searching for someone extraordinary, not just in beauty, but in heart. And I found her, not in flawless perfection, but in laughter, wit, kindness, and occasionally chaotic charm." He gestured towards Cinderella, who gave a mock bow. "You see," he continued, "she has a way of turning spilled tea into a story, tripping over curtains into adventure, and somehow making me laugh even when I'm trying to be serious." Cinderella giggled, covering her mouth. "I do try, Your Highness," she teased, "though sometimes the castle just gets in the way." The prince stepped closer, taking her hands gently. "I adore you, Cinderella. Not for the gowns, not for the glass slippers, not even for surviving my kingdom's endless formalities, but for you." Cinderella's eyes shimmered. She had feared losing herself in the grandeur of royal life, becoming just another picture in the palace halls. But standing here, seeing the joy in his eyes, she realized that love could be grand without being stifling. It could be playful, funny, and real. I was afraid, she admitted softly, that I'd have to be perfect, or serious, or quiet. But with you, I can be me, laughing, tripping, talking to furniture if I want. The prince laughed, leaning closer. Then I vow to always laugh with you, to stumble with you, and to face life's chaos together, hand in hand, heart in heart. Cinderella's smile widened, a sparkle in her eyes. And I promise, she said teasingly, to keep life interesting, to keep you on your toes, and, if necessary, order too many pies for the royal kitchen. The hall erupted in laughter, from courtiers to staff, delighted by the couple's wit, charm, and genuine love. The prince pulled Cinderella into a gentle, playful dance, their steps light, imperfect, and perfect at the same time. I suppose, the prince whispered, we make a rather remarkable team. Indeed we do, Cinderella replied, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. And the adventure is just beginning. As they twirled and laughed, the kingdom realized that love had truly won, not just through titles or riches, but through joy, partnership, and hearts that found one another in the most enchanting, unpredictable ways. The palace gardens were alive with music, laughter, and the scent of blooming roses. Banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, golden sunlight glinting off the palace walls. Today was not just any day. It was the day the kingdom would witness the union of Cinderella and her prince, a couple beloved, not just for their love, but for the joy and laughter they shared. Cinderella arrived in a gown of soft ivory, adorned with delicate embroidery that sparkled in the sunlight. Her glass slippers glittered as she walked, but she paused to give the royal hounds a playful pat and whisper a joke to the palace mice, who squeaked in approval. The prince, sharp in his royal attire, but with a mischievous grin, waited at the altar, clearly struggling to contain his excitement. You look perfect, he said, though his eyes twinkled with the memory of her tripping over curtains, spilling tea, and ordering 500 pies. And you look heroic, Cinderella replied, smirking. Heroic enough to survive my sense of humor for the rest of your life? I dare say I'm ready for the challenge, he said, bowing slightly. The ceremony was filled with small moments of humor. A page tripped while carrying the rings. A bird attempted to nest in Cinderella's hair. And the stepsisters, now humbled, nervously fumbled with their bouquets. Cinderella whispered a gentle joke to ease their nerves, and they smiled, realizing they had been forgiven. The vows were heartfelt and playful. I promise, the prince declared, to laugh with you, stumble with you, and share in every adventure, big or small, by your side. And I promise, Cinderella said, her eyes shining, to keep life exciting, to embrace joy even in chaos, and to make sure we never stop laughing, even if it means stepping on royal toes occasionally. The kingdom erupted in cheers, fireworks sparkled above, and the animals, Cinderella's old friends, joined in the celebration, scurrying, hopping, and prancing through the gardens, much to the delight of the guests. At the reception, Cinderella's cleverness became the talk of the palace, not for mischief this time, but for brilliant ideas that added charm and warmth to every aspect of the royal court. The stepsisters, once vain and scheming, found a new respect for her wit and heart, and even the stepmother learned that kindness and laughter could coexist with authority. As twilight fell, the couple took to the palace terrace. Hand in hand, they danced under a sky blanketed with stars, the soft glow of lanterns reflecting in the glass slippers on Cinderella's feet. The prince leaned close. "You know," he said softly, "I never thought royal life could be this fun." Cinderella laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Fun, love, and a little chaos. That's how I like my happily ever after." The music swelled, the kingdom cheered, and the couple twirled beneath the stars. In that magical moment, they proved that love, laughter, and a touch of clever chaos could indeed live happily ever after. The palace echoed with joy, the animals squeaked in celebration, and the story of Cinderella and her prince became one told for generations, a tale of romance, humor, and the magic of finding love in the most unexpected, delightful ways.
The Stories book is a captivating collection of tales that traverse diverse genres and emotions, spanning the realms of fantasy, science fiction, romance, and mystery. Each narrative is a journey into the unexpected, weaving intricate plots and compelling characters. With a skillful blend of vivid imagery and thought-provoking themes, this anthology invites readers to explore the depths of imagination and discover the universal threads that connect us all. From heartwarming moments to spine. We hope you enjoyed these captivating video stories. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content like this. Thanks for watching, and keep spreading the video story.